Okay, I recently published a book in January, in fact, before my birthday, which was January the 9th. That was like my birthday present to myself, was to publish my latest book, and I finally got my print copy. Okay, How to Choose and Keep a Wife, a Marriage Guide by Coach the Bruyns. So this is my latest book. I've been going through it. Sometimes you gotta actually not read a book that you've written recently and then go through it later to kind of get a sense of where your ideas need to follow on for a later book also, and also where the book might be lacking as an author. You would know that, where you could have explained things better, etc. No book is perfect, of course, but as books go, I think this book is a very important book for men who are either looking to get married or who are looking at improving on their marriages. It gives very valuable advice in a very direct way, and it helps men sort of conceptualize where they fit into not only marriage but into the world at large, because marriage is just a substructure of existence and society, etc. And so I just want to touch on a few things from the book to share with you guys and hopefully encourage you to get it. It's $9 actually only, and $8.99 to be exact. And it's totally worth it because guidance is really valuable. I mean, you can live your life and make all your own mistakes, or you can learn from the mistakes of others. And I think as an author, as a 40-year-old man, as a man who has married, and who has lived a polygynous lifestyle, who has had multiple wives, I think I have gained valuable experience, and also I have done significant research into the field of marriage, religion, polygyny, etc. And I've also learned from the experiences of other men and women. And so having said that, really that's where I'm coming from, and that's where I'm going to be, helping you men get somewhere in your lives in relation to your relationship ambitions, marriage or long-term relationships. Now, first, why I say marriage or long-term relationships is because a lot of marriages are not long-term, and I believe that a marriage that is not long-term, at least more than 6 months or a year, cannot really be called a marriage, even if it met the requirements of the law. So someone legally gets married. I just saw a video where Jean-Claude Van Damme's second marriage lasted for 3 months. Okay, now that can hardly be called a marriage. Okay, he's a famous actor. In the time that he was in his youth, of course, and also religiously, society was more religious. You needed to kind of get married. But being married for 3 months, and if that happens consistently to a person, then it shows a lack in judgment and also a lack in understanding the needs of commitment. Okay, now this happens quite often in modern society because we don't always have a cultural underpinning or a united common core cultural underpinning that informs us of where the boundaries lie and what our expectations might be in a relationship. And as a result, we find that we often have to discuss all these things at length before marriage, and we don't. Okay, we just jump into it, and then we find ourselves in a marriage, and then we're like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And then the first thing is you look for the door. Now, in that regard, I would say that it speaks of a lack of commitment, because if you understand that by getting married, the goal is to remain in the relationship forever, permanently, then you will use every opportunity to remain within the marriage, meaning not every opportunity to exit the marriage. You will not try to disrupt the relationship needlessly. You will not try to violate the boundaries of the relationship. You will not try to go against your married partner in matters that they have ostensibly made known that they would not be able to tolerate, etc. So these are things that all need to be discussed ahead of time. So I will just, as a teaser for this book, go to the first chapter, which is What is Marriage? Okay, this is now apart from the introduction. The first chapter is What is Marriage? Let me actually first go to the introduction. So let me show you, this is the table of contents here. Okay, let's see now. Okay, introduction, what is marriage, what is a husband, what is a wife, the incentives for a woman to be a wife, the incentives for a man to be a husband, vetting a wife, the qualities of a wife. Okay, and then we have, let me turn, these are all the topics that I discuss. It's a lot of topics, but I discuss them very concisely. Which way now? That way is that way, that way is this way. Okay, polygyny, family, religion. As you can see, they're dating. You married her, then what? And then there's some other topics. Yeah, I have a checklist. I have a discussion on concubinage, fatherhood, mate guarding. Okay, so there's a lot of nice, juicy discussions in this book. Some unconventional topics also, and also some unconventional suggestions. In a world where things are upside down, we sometimes need to rock the boat a bit, where we have gone to extremes. It sometimes takes a bit of an extreme in the opposite direction to pull things back on center again. And in that way, this book does do some of that, okay? Or a lot of things, in fact, that was considered normal just 50 years ago are considered extreme today. So it shows you how far we have moved away from our common core traditions as people of traditional values, both Muslims and Christians. So let me go to the introduction, and I'll read it for you. It says, imagine a world in which people are unable to pair bond and raise children, where men and women are unable to understand each other and unable to meet each other's expectations. What type of world will we have where there are no longer men and women, and gender was really just a construct after all? We don't have to imagine anymore. We are fast approaching that world where the script is being flipped and where women have in effect become men and where men are becoming like women. How do we re-establish a world that looks more familiar? How do we get back to sanity in this insane world where we are increasingly seeing chaos, instability, and a potential annihilation of our species? This book tells you how to do that. At the heart of any civilization are strong families that are able to provide stability and perpetuate patriarchy. None of that is possible if men don't have standards. It is in fact the men that hold the power cards, but have lost sight of how to use it. This book will teach you about the types of standards you could have, why you should have them, and how to go about being married once you found the right woman. Be warned, as always, that I do not spare my reader from being offended by my content. I say it as it is. If you are overly sensitive, incapable of thinking rationally, and you frequently succumb to your emotions, then do not read further. Spare yourself the grief and put this book down. You can even return it. However, if you are interested in truth, facts, and civilization, then this is a great book for you to learn the inherent ways of patriarchy within marriage. Feminists who argue that marriage is essentially a patriarchal structure and therefore should be rejected were right about the first part. Marriage is indeed patriarchal, and it only works under patriarchy. A lot of the advice in this book reinforces patriarchy as the millah of Ibrahim, or the established norms of Ibrahim. The last few thousands of years in human history were predominantly informed by the Abrahamic religions and customs. As a marriage construct, whether social or religious, it is nearly impossible to escape religion as such, at least when considering its foundations. While this isn't a religious guide for people, it does closely resemble that. Despite acknowledging many of the religious aspects of marriage, this book isn't confined to religion and draws on many scientific facts. As one can expect, my book isn't squarely in line with any religious doctrine per se, even though I draw on Islamic religious sources. The rules of marriage in this book, however, is squarely mainstream when it comes to Orthodox Christianity and Islam. I acknowledge gender roles as defined through the latter religions, but I also encourage flexibility given our particular modern context. I do not condone the attitude that specifies men as breadwinners and women as homemakers as the only viable patriarchal structure for marriage. I point out that women have always worked hard in pre-modern societies alongside their husbands and towards the same goal as feeding and clothing the family. You will find in this book a checklist you can use when choosing a wife after gaining a good grounding in the theories I present here. The checklist is conclusive and, if followed, will produce accurate results. That is, if you don't mind personality clashes and see it as inconsequential. To that end, I do recommend each person assess themselves and detail their own preferences, even if the checklist checks out. I also show the importance of a man's jealousy over his woman and the importance of mate guarding. This particular subject is often frowned on because people without sufficient gender nuance usually assume that jealousy is bad. I demonstrate why jealousy is an important instinct and how it is imperative for your mate to consider your jealousy in how she behaves with strange men. Finally, I discuss concubinage in relative detail to demonstrate that both ancient and modern societies have never confined bona fide sexual relationships to marriage. If you find that after reading this book you have more questions than answers, feel free to engage me. You can find me right here on X by searching for Coach the Bruyns.